everyone, welcome to another exciting edition of Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Vince.
Vince, today's question comes from Nightspawn, who asks, when it comes to the two major team books, Avengers and Justice League, who has to be on it to make it feel like the team is complete, and or who are your preferred members for the team? Now, what I want to do was take this question and kind of expound upon it to, we'll answer the question, but we'll also talk about team books in general, team books and comic books, and what we think makes for good team books, whether we prefer, single characters versus teams, and what team books are like now versus what they used to be like. So let's go ahead and address the question first, Vince.
Yeah, so here, who are my preferred, who does it have to be? Well, for Justice League, it generally has to be the big ones for me. It's got to be Superman and Wonder Woman and Batman and Green Lantern. These people have to be on the Justice League to me. Now, not every Justice League story told has to involve them, but those people have to be on the team. But for
you wanted to be the cream of the crop of the DCU. Like for me with Justice League, I all those characters, yes. And then there's others that can kind of come out where I can see they're coming in and out where I can see them as being in the team or not being in the team. Like Martian Manhunter is one of those characters that I want on the Justice League, but he doesn't have to be there necessarily.
Yeah.
Green Arrow I can see on the Justice League, but he isn't most of the time.
Yeah.
But I can see it.
I mean, there's a lot of characters that I could see in the Justice League, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be. I mean, I like the big three, and then some of the other big ones.
Yeah, and Flash.
Yeah, I mean, some of the other ones, Green Lantern and Flash, and there are staples of the Justice League that are big characters. That was the point of the Justice League. The Justice League was to bring all of their big characters together into a single book, so that people could, it would just attract more readers.
Yeah.
So right. Somebody's like, I like Batman a lot, and I'm going to be reading this other book that Batman's in. Oh, look, Flash is really cool. Let's read Flash's book.
And Avengers was different from that.
Yeah.
Because that book did include some of Marvel's more popular characters, but then it invented some. Or if it didn't invent them, it at least brought in some... Because actually, I say that, I don't know that. I always saw Hawkeye as an Avengers character. I think maybe he was invented for that. I don't know. Hank Pym, Wasp. These seem like they're Avengers characters. I don't know my Marvel history in that regard well enough to know if they were actually created for that book, but I think they were.
I think they existed beforehand. I know that Hawkeye was a supervillain who had gotten I think Hawkeye was the guy that got a hold of some of Hank Pym's Pym particles.
Yeah.
So he existed prior to being Hawkeye.
Oh, okay.
Clint Barton.
But that still means he kind of came out of that book.
Well, I don't know where these guys started, but in my mind, you need some of these smaller characters. You need Hawkeye to be on the Avengers. You need Ant-Man and Wasp because these guys, these lesser-known characters, make the Avengers. They're the ones that make it interesting. I mean, Captain America and Iron Man are generally on the Avengers, and I wouldn't sacrifice them.
But kind of team leaders, really.
Yeah, I mean,
they seem to exchange that role sometimes. By the way, right? I mean, usually you sort of see Captain America as the leader of the Avengers, but Iron Man also to a point.
Yeah, I can tell you who I really don't want to see in the Avengers.
Most of who's there right now, besides the staples.
Yeah, I was going to say Spider-Man and Wolverine. I don't want them in the Avengers. I mean, they do not uphold... Well, Spider-Man does, but the things that were interesting about Spider-Man to me are now, rendered infeasible because he's a member of the Avengers.
Well, and also because he's on so many teams, and Wolverine is the same way. What's weird about Spider-Man to me, being on a bunch of teams, is I liked it when he filled in back in the day. A lot of times in a lot of 70s and 80s books, he would jump in when somebody needed help. You know what I mean? And even before that, when he was briefly on the Fantastic Four, just helping out, but not a permanent member. I think there was a point where he tried out for the team or something, and I think the point of that was Spider-Man's not really a team guy. It's not that he can't work on a team. It's not that he's not a quote team player, but I think that he's kind of like the optimistic loner. He's like the loner for the opposite reason that Batman is.
I've always seen Spider-Man as the type of guy who takes it all. He'll bear the weight of the entire burden. He's that type of guy. And can he work well? Does he play well with others? Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of crossovers that come into his book.
Well, and how much Marvel team up with Spider-Man and someone?
Yeah. But usually it's... And I can understand... See, the way I always saw it was Spider-Man was just slightly too immature to be part of a team, but he was brilliant, so he could solve the problems on his own. And he was physically effective, so that he could physically solve the problems on his own. So why does Spider-Man need to be on a team?
Maybe from a story perspective, or just from the practicality of storytelling, Spider-Man's almost too big of a personality in a way to be constantly a member of a team. I mean, like what we see him do a lot now, and I mean, I guess that's kind of unfair because saying that makes it sound like I don't think that Captain America has much personality or Iron Man has much personality. They do. It's just a different thing. Like, part of the problem with Spider-Man being on so many teams right now is that so often, at least in the arcs I've been reading in both FF and Avengers, I haven't been reading him in any other books, but those two, the stories are almost never about him.
Yeah.
He almost doesn't play a big role very often, and it's more he's there for comic relief. I don't like Spider-Man being the comic relief.
You know, maybe I just had this thought. I think it's interesting. Spider-Man is a big personality. Spider-Man is a brilliant guy.
So is Wolverine.
Yeah. But Spider-Man is a type of guy who can give himself direction, and he doesn't really need to be coached. He's bright enough that he can do that, but he's not necessarily commanding enough to direct a team. So therefore, you have this guy who just doesn't fit. He's a genius, and yet he's also, I don't want to say he doesn't play well with others, but he's smart enough to be one of the bigs, but he's not mature enough to be able to direct a team. And maybe mature is not the right word.
Well, he doesn't have to be the leader. I mean,
yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like we're somewhat struggling with this a little bit, just because I think it would only be fair and objective to say part of the problem is just we saw him by himself for so long.
Yeah,
that suddenly having him on teams just feels weird. The problem with Wolverine being on a bunch of teams is that he's supposed to be a loner.
Yeah,
you know,
he's supposed to be reluctantly part of the X-Men, or at least initially
reluctantly. He goes in and out of them, and then now he's an Avenger. He's a card-carrying Avenger.
You know, he was also one of the Fantastic Four at one point. So. You know, I read Marvel Universe versus Wolverine issue 1. I read that today, and what's interesting about that to me is during this first issue, they've captured Patient Zero, i.e., Spider-Man. This guy who's spreading this virus throughout New York City, or at least they thought he was. And Wolverine asks Mr. Fantastic, who's watching, he's studying this creature that is now Spider-Man, and he says, what's wrong with him? And Mr. Fantastic says to Wolverine, he's like, well, you've worked with him more than I have, and I thought, that's a problem. Wolverine and Spider-Man are two uniquely different people that have no reason to be working together. And, these are two people that are just going to, their personalities are going to clash. They're going to get on each other's nerves.
Well, and that's the thing that's been fun about seeing them together before. But yeah, the idea that they would work together a lot. But they're Avengers now, so they would. Yeah.
And the book was acting like they're big buddies, or at least they were big buddies. And not to say that they were best friends, but people who had this decent working relationship. And Wolverine is all business. Spider-Man is at least half nonsense. So
I think and we should probably go back to DC at some point. I'm just throwing that out there. Let's not forget that there's Justice League to talk about. But again, like you, I'm just tacking that up to the wall. Justice League. But with Marvel, I feel like a lot of these characters were invented to be with certain other characters, and we've kind of forgotten that because we're so in tune now to the Marvel universe. Like, when it started, Stan Lee had a good handle on the Marvel universe. Like he came up with the idea that this is all going to happen in the same universe. For a long time, DC's stuff seemed to kind of happen in different places, and you weren't always sure if it was all together. In you know what I mean? Especially really early, in the 40s and 50s. But when we're talking about Marvel, from Marvel's inception, it was one universe. And Stan Lee did that because he thought it was fun that if the Fantastic Four needed a lawyer, they could call him Matt Murdock. That sort of thing. That it's all in the same universe in the sense that we can have these little crossover cameos here and there, and if we want to do big stuff with these characters, we can, but still, these are they're not separate universes, but they're separate stories that are being told.
Yeah.
You know, where sometimes we'll bring up, you know, one story to another, but you see what I'm saying. For the most part, you can read Fantastic Four and never be hit over the head with you're in the Marvel universe. You don't have to know who Daredevil is or who Spider-Man is, etc., etc. These days, it's all together. You read one Marvel book, you're reading all of Marvel. And I'm not saying it's necessarily bad. I'm making an observation. That's what's going on now, and it just strikes me as a little bit surreal because we've got these characters that used to be primarily seen with other characters that aren't with them much anymore, or at least that are constantly with a lot of others. You know, Wolverine is an X-Man, and he's still in all the X titles, but then he's in all these other places also.
Yeah. I mean, there are characters that I'd like to read in a team. There are characters that I'd like to read by themselves. And there are characters that, you know, can go either way. And I think Wolverine is an interesting enough character that he's one of those guys that I like reading him in a team and I like reading him solo. But I don't necessarily think that he needs to be part of every team. I think that we're starting to jump the shark a little bit here. We're trying to get everybody into every team, and eventually we're just going to have one big melting pot of it's going to be not Justice League. It's going to be Avengers 1 and then Avengers 1 featuring the Avengers.
That's what. Thanks for saying that, because that's ultimately what I wanted to get to. Is the Avengers is not what it used to be. What Avengers has become, honestly, is Marvel superheroes.
Yeah.
You know, we used to have books that were like Marvel superheroes, and you'd get any characters you wanted to together, and then they'd go do something, and it could be anybody you wanted to. Now Avengers is anybody you want them to be, and we've got several Avengers teams now. And what we're finding, Eric and I were talking about this the other day. He said that he was reading an issue of, I forget what it was, if it was Secret Avengers or what it was, but it was one of the other Avengers titles. And one of the regular Avengers characters popped over into one of the other teams, just randomly was there. Or maybe it was like one of the, I forget who it was. Maybe it was like Beast was suddenly in the regular Avengers when he's with the Secret. I forget. See, it's hard to keep it all straight, and I'm not reading them all. But what I'm saying is, we're just bringing anybody we want now. It's like, this isn't a book about these characters. It's the Avengers, and that means it's a bunch of superheroes. And we've got all these arcs happening now where you've got tons and tons of characters. You've got way too many people all in a book. And guess what? Half the time, they're standing around. Like it's about the 2 or 3 characters it's about, and then everybody else is there, but they just spend a lot of time standing.
You know, I like the idea of having an Avengers affiliate. I mean, Beast used to be a member of the Avengers. What I like is having distinct and separate teams and not a whole lot of them. Because we used to have the Avengers, we used to have the, I think it was the comedic version of the Avengers, the West Coast Avengers.
Right.
We used to have the Defenders.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's right.
We had these separate teams, and now we have these, like, it's all just this big melting pot of Avengers. Initially, when the new Avengers came about, how I felt about it was that they were trying to... they were just trying to get all of their big names into one book. They essentially looked at DC and said, well, they have all their bigs in one book. Let's put all our bigs in one book. And, it sounds, I guess, like a marketing genius type of move. Well, let's get all of our big sellers into the same book and everybody will buy that.
Yeah, see, you keep doing this. You keep going the place I was about to go. You're amazing. Vince is apparently completely telepathic, because the next point I was going to make is it seems like it's become too business. Mm-hmm. And kind of to a point of absurdity when it comes to the Avengers titles, right? Because like you said, it doesn't seem like there's any rhyme or reason to why certain characters are on certain teams except they're popular. So why is Wolverine on every team? And we've said this millions of times before. Why is Wolverine on every team? Well, because he sells books. Why is Spider-Man on every team? Well, he sells books. Well, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't it gets in the way of storytelling.
I mean, that's the thing, is that it depends. Do you have a story that Spider-Man is merited in being in? I know the syntax of that statement was entirely off, but if the story deserves to have Spider-Man in it, or if Spider-Man deserves to be in the story, go ahead. You know, I'm not going to say that Spider-Man can't be on the Avengers, or at least for a certain period of time. But, make your characters worthwhile. Don't just put them in the book. I mean, what's the point of... Like, for example, Identity Crisis I liked a lot. Here's a Justice League book that we're talking about. I mean, granted, it wasn't Justice League Identity Crisis, I don't believe.
No, it wasn't.
But it was essentially about the members of the Justice League.
Right.
And we acknowledged that the Big Three existed. We said these are people that are certainly looming over this situation, and we were allowed to tell stories about other people in the Avengers.
Well, actually, I think that there were a lot of characters involved in that who weren't really Justice Leaguers.
Well, there was quite a few Justice Leaguers.
Yeah, but part of the point of Identity Crisis was to bring to the forefront some minor characters that hadn't been that much, if I remember right. But it's been a while since I read it.
Yeah, and Identity Crisis, and now one of the major characters is dead.
Yeah, well, there's that. But yeah, let's go over to DC for a minute and kind of compare the way the teams are done.
Yeah, let's walk across the street
because right, because DC doesn't seem to be to have the same marketing strategy with their teams. They don't have a character who's on every team, and they don't have like a bunch of different Justice Leagues. Although with the relaunch, they are going to have two. They are doing Justice League Dark, which is interesting.
Yeah, I saw that and I thought, oh look, they're doing Justice League Dark. What do you know?
Yeah, there's that. But at least, and we can't really speak to the relaunch yet. But just at this present moment, what's been happening with DC. They seem to more have the strategy that you're talking about that you prefer, which is having separate teams with characters that are usually there and make sense. Now, the Justice League has been moved around a lot, but even when it is, it's not like it's that melting pot that you're talking about. It's here are the characters that go on this team, and then at some point they'll change the entire lineup.
The way I've always seen the Justice League, you're not entirely... I'm going to disagree with you slightly, but you're not entirely wrong here.
All right.
I think the Justice League has always been... Everybody in the DC universe who's ever been a superhero is going to essentially be a card-carrying Justice League member at some point.
What's the difference between that and what's happening with Avengers right now?
Well, the difference
where they're all there at the same time.
Yeah, the difference is that these people will walk in and out of the book, and that's where you're right, and that's how I like it. Is that there are essentially members who are basically affiliates.
It's like at this point, this is the Justice League.
Yeah, we're not.
At some point, it will be a different lineup.
Yeah, we're not always going to have Zatanna being in the book all the time.
Right.
And we don't necessarily need everybody who's ever been on the team in the same book at the same time. Not everything has to be drawn by George Perez.
Yeah.
Or whoever that guy is. Whoever the guy is that likes to draw every character in one panel.
I see what you're saying, but I mean, like, it's not just Justice League. I mean, then you've got Teen Titans, which is generally essentially the same team.
Yeah,
and
there's something that I kind of like to point out here.
Okay.
Is that, look at the major team books. Most of them have a Bat character on them, which is not a big...
You did it again! Because the next point I was going to make is that Marvel is all about... these characters must be on these teams. Spider-Man, Wolverine, these days Iron Man. The big characters that are and Captain America because of the movie. These are the characters that are selling. They must be everywhere. DC's strategy is we will just put Bat in everything.
Mm-hmm. And that's not necessarily...
A million Batman books, and then something Batman-related in all our team books.
That's not necessarily a wholesale problem, because Birds of Prey, I mean, you have a lot of Bat influence, but not necessarily Batman. And Teen Titans, you don't necessarily have Batman, but you do have Robin. And
both of those are in some way or another offshoots of Bat titles, right? I mean, Birds of Prey is a Bat book. Mm-hmm. For all intents and purposes. You wouldn't have Birds of Prey without Batman.
I mean, Outsiders, you have Nightwing, and at one point it was Batman and the Outsiders is what the book was called.
Actually, multiple points, I think. They went in and out, yeah.
I mean, so a lot of team books have something to do with Batman. It's absurd considering...
Really good point.
Considering Batman's supposed to be this sort of loner guy, he has a lot of affiliates.
Yeah, and, I mean, the Bat family is huge.
I guess that's just because, everybody likes Bat family... everybody likes Batman, and therefore the characters in the universe are going to want to be part of it. And Batman is going to logically find somebody who is an effective crime fighter, whether they get killed by the Joker eventually or not.
In fact, I'm going to take this moment to make a really weird assertion. Let's see how wrong I am. Somebody else. We were looking at questions earlier for the GNN Q&A and stuff like that, and so this is something that'll come up later. I'm not going to look it up and see who asked us this. We'll talk about this later. But there was a question asked to us about the validity of X-Men being part of the Marvel Universe, because X-Men feels like its own universe in a lot of ways. And I would almost go, tell me how wrong I am, I would almost go as far as to say that Batman almost has that in DC.
Well,
do you see what I'm saying? Because yes, Batman by himself is the loner, but the Bat family is so huge that the Batman universe has such a different feel than just the DCU. You see what I'm saying?
You have a good point. I think that X-Men have a much deeper thing that should be talked about. But
Batman, and we will eventually. But that's why I wanted to bring it up, because
Batman is to the DCU in a similar way that the Punisher is to the Marvel U.
You think?
Yeah, because here's the Batman. Here's a guy who really has no business being on a team. He's generally sort of an angry loner type, and he doesn't really play well with others. I mean, it depends on how you on which incarnation of Batman we're looking at.
Well, yeah,
but generally, like for example, look at the video game Justice League Heroes. I know it's not a comic book, but I'm bringing it up. They had Batman seem like he just had disdain for most of the other people, and he was just like quietly putting up with the other characters. And I get annoyed when I read books that have Batman and he's talking about members of the Justice League like they're incompetents. And I'm like, why is this guy a member of the Justice League? Why does he care to be a part of it?
I see what you mean, but I'm talking more supporting cast. I mean, it's not like Punisher has this giant supporting cast. I'm saying that X-Men is this huge thing where there's all these characters that are involved with X-Men. But I'm saying you can almost look at Gotham City like X-Men.
You know,
that's what I'm saying.
Here's a good point. That's a good point too. You have this universe that is essentially
in tone, if nothing else.
You have this universe that is essentially spawning people who have no powers to try to fight crime, and there's not a whole lot of stuff that happens outside the Batman realm that does that. I mean, you have Steel, who, if you ignore Batman and what he's doing, Steel is a much more impressive character. He's because Batman is a guy with a utility belt and a bunch of gadgets, and he's he trains a lot. Steel is a guy who created his own. He essentially put a bunch of those gadgets together and made himself Superman.
He's also not a rich guy.
Yeah,
and all of that. Yeah.
So Steel,
he didn't have the same means. And what's kind of sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, that's cool.
What's cool about Steel is that he doesn't require that tragic background.
Yeah,
he does it simply because he has the means. I think there actually is maybe a little bit of background with him, but I mean, like, it's not that profound thing like it is with Batman, where it's like, you know, my parents got murdered and I had this big profound experience. With Steel, it's like I have the means and I'm compelled because I care. And that makes him instantly interesting.
Steel has the bootstraps.
Yeah.
He can pull himself up. And that's what's interesting is Steel is a guy, ignoring Batman, Steel is more impressive. But, looking at Batman, who is doing, perceivably more with less. If you look at how many books Batman is in.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Steel's more impressive necessarily.
Well,
it's
not more impressive than
the world's greatest detective.
I'm not saying he's more impressive than Batman. I'm saying if you ignore what Batman has done and how popular Batman is, if you pretend that Batman didn't exist, Steel's more impressive because he's sort of on an island. There's not a whole lot of unpowered DC heroes. Now, I could be wrong.
A really good point. No, there's not. And no, because when you try to think of it, it's
Question and Beetle, but those weren't DC characters originally. Those were Charlton characters.
By the way, let me interject really quick with the relaunch. Where is the Steel Monthly?
Yeah, Mr. Terrific beat him out.
Yeah, Mr. Terrific got one, and then they made up this new Cricket character, and he gets his own book. But Steel got a one-shot this year to lead into the Reign of the Doomsdays plot, and I thought for sure when the relaunch happened because by the way, guess who else got a one-shot? Static Shock. He's getting his own monthly. Where's Steel's monthly?
I don't
have to do a rant this week. That's my rant.
The thing about it is Steel, post 52, with the biggest, most interesting part of 52 revolving around Steel and Lex Luthor, but revolving around Steel, why is Steel not a bigger part of this? I mean,
that validates him getting his own book, at least getting a good miniseries.
It was only, 4 years ago?
That wasn't that long ago.
They made Steel into the most interesting character in all of 52, and they had everybody in 52, except for Superman and Batman. Well, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were there, they were just kind of shafted, I guess.
Well, and I always thought that just the idea that one of the 4 Supermen in Reign of the Superman would be someone with no superpowers, such a cool idea. That in and of itself makes him interesting.
Oh,
anyway, I don't know. I don't know how we ran off on a Steel tangent, but
well,
I guess I got excited because I didn't realize you liked that character.
Well, I liked Steel in 52, and I think that Steel deserves more than what he's getting. And I just think that people like to focus on Batman. Oh, he doesn't have any powers. Oh, and Batman does all this cool stuff.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, but Steel is a guy that does something that's somewhat more impressive. He created this stuff without money.
In fact, I would make the case that most of the, not counting Steel, but most of the unpowered heroes in DC are offshoots of Batman.
Yeah.
Robin, Nightwing, Huntress, Robin. Huntress, Robin. Spoiler, Robin. Spoiler, Robin.
Red Robin.
Oracle. Batgirl, Robin.
In fact, if you look at this, they always try to make Batman and Batman's affiliates try to be more... They fight so much... Like, they'll go into team books and they'll fight stuff that's beyond their means. When Batman is really a street-level crime fighter.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I mean, Batman... The reason why Batman is so impressive is because he's the world's greatest detective. He's not the world's greatest guy that can punch Darkseid in the face.
Or shoot him with a gun.
Or shoot him with a gun. It's, you put... Essentially what Steel did, he created something that allowed him to fight villains of the same caliber that Superman can. And when you look at Batman, when you look at the Blue Beetle, when you look at the original Blue Beetle, and the second one, Ted Kord, and you look at the Question, you have these guys who essentially fight human issues, human problems. And then you have these other guys who fight non-human threats. So... I find it kind of odd that people like to overestimate what Batman's capable of, or at least what Batman is generally capable of. And maybe I'm underestimating Batman, but I like him more when he's fighting crime.
No, I do too.
Cosmic threats.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think a lot of people are that way. Well, we kind of ran off away from teams.
Well, we were still talking about the involvement of teams and talking about affiliates of groups. I mean, Batman is basically a team in of itself.
Yeah, that was the case I was trying to make. So, final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I think we need to pull Spider-Man off of at least 6 teams.
No, I do too.
I just threw out a number. I don't know. But I think Wolverine needs to go back to being just an X-Men. And I think we need to generally fix both the Ultimate and the regular Marvel U in regards to the Avengers. And I think they may be doing that with the Ultimate Universe. I don't know. We'll see what happens when they do their new books with new writers.
What do you think? What do you think about DC?
DC, I really don't have a problem with DC. I mean, I understand maybe it's a little bit of a cop out to put a Bat character in every team, but really, since it's not Batman on every team, it's not a problem for me.
It's going to be interesting with the relaunch because they're making up some teams. And it's going to be a kind of different thing. And they've already been kind of doing that. I mean, Secret Six is a team book, and people love it. And I haven't read it, but I mean, it's kind of villains.
Yeah. I'll say this: that regardless of how JLA Dark turns out, it could be an awesome book.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'd prefer them to have a different name. JLA Dark sounds dumb to me.
My guess is that they won't actually call themselves that. My guess is that that's just the name of the book.
I suppose it could just be, hey, we're part of the JLA, but this is the members of them that are kind of creepy.
No, it's his own team.
That bothers me. I would love them to have a different name. I mean, what's wrong with being a Defender rather than an Avenger?
That's a good point. But my assumption is that book happened partially because Secret Six is popular and they're not just straight superheroes. I don't know that for sure, but we'll see how it goes. Well, let's go ahead and jump over to rants, and I will do a different rant, even though I did my Steel rant. But why don't you go ahead, Vince?
I've noticed this thing. There's this trend that covers either have spoilers on them or have nothing to do with the book. Like, I bought this series of Fantastic Four comics at one point, and every issue, or I bought them in trade, and pretty much every trade cover certainly, but every issue basically had just the 4 characters standing in different poses, and that annoyed me. Like, how am I supposed to really know this issue from that issue? I mean, I go into a store and I say, well, do I have this one? Because it looks just like the one that came out last week or last month. And that annoys me. I think there should be something on the cover that indicates what, like, something that has to do with the previous issue that says, hey, you know, this is where it's going. Like, oh, well, this is going to be good because we know that this guy is in this issue and this is all the problems that they're causing. I don't know. Maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill. But what's the point of having a cover if it's the same thing as last month?
That's a good point.
And also, what's the point of having a cover if you're going to spoil the ending of the book that's inside? I'm kind of merging two rants together, but I have no really good examples.
That's kind of the opposite of the problem of having covers that have nothing to do with the book.
Yeah, I think basically what this rant is have a cover that's relevant, but don't have a cover that spoils. I mean, have a cover that has something to do with what you're buying. I get annoyed when, like, for example, I understand that there are a bunch of variants, but I pick up a book that has a zombie on the cover. I expect to read some zombies. You know,
not with variants though. Variants are different. I mean, they don't have to necessarily have everything to do with the. That's why they're variants.
Yeah,
the variants are collector's items before they're practical.
No, you're right about that. I'm just saying that when I pick up a book that has something on the cover, like for example,
but you know it's a variant. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
like they generally make it pretty obvious that things are variants.
Here's a terrific example of a cover having nothing to do.
Yeah.
Infestation Star Trek. Where were the zombie trebles?
You remember I complained about that in my review, and I gave that the first issue at least a favorable review and said this is great, but where's the freaking zombie tribbles?
It's on the cover. Where are they? Apparently, the cover is the answer to that question.
Yeah, because wasn't that the second one, which neither of us really cared for, and wasn't the cover 100 times cooler than anything that happened inside the book?
Yeah, well, it kind of happened with both of them. The first one seemed like it was going somewhere really cool, and the second one's like, peter out and anticlimax.
Because if I recall, in the Ghostbusters one, they put a zombie Marshmallow Man on the cover,
yeah.
And then there was one. Or
yeah.
was there not? Wasn't there a zombie Marshmallow Man?
I believe there was.
Well, see? I mean, people would buy that because they had the zombie Marshmallow Man, and then they won't cry because he's there.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, if you can do something that absurd there, and you're doing Infestation, why can't you have zombie tribbles? That's all I'm saying.
I seem to recall there being zombie Marshmallow Man. I'm
pretty sure there was.
I'll have to go back and look, but I think.
I want my zombie tribbles now. I'm very upset about that.
Well, buy a tribble and then cover it in goo and make it a zombie tribble.
Yeah, but you know what'll happen at the end of the zombie tribble arc? They'll all be regular tribbles, but they'll just look like zombies.
Yeah, that's what happened to all the human zombies in that book. So stupid Infestation with all of its crappy stories.
I believe you did a whole rant on just that on the podcast.
That's highly annoying. Why would you do that?
All right, is it my turn?
Yeah.
This should be simple and quick and easy. I, like many consumers, am sick of my wallet being filled up with discount cards. I'm just tired of discount. Every company seems to have these discount cards, and here's the thing about it. It's okay when they're actually helpful, and it's even okay if you have to pay for them. They're actually helpful, and you know how to do math, and you can tell. Well, I spend this much a year at this store, and if I get your dopey discount card, then I'll save enough that it was worth spending the money on the card. Whatever. What irritates me about them is that they're so super gimmicky. Every company acts like they came up with this idea.
Yeah.
Right? Grocery stores, clothing stores, movie theaters, game stores, you name it. These places have these things, and they drill it into their employees. And I'm speaking from experience because I've had to do this at places I've worked to, and I don't like it. And so that's part of where this comes from, certainly. I'm not working in a place that does that now, of course. But I used to. And what's irritating about it is that it's drilled into these people to act like it's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
And it's irritating because you, as a clerk, know that it's not, and the consumer knows that it's not, and it's obvious how ultra gimmicky it is. And besides, there's just, if everybody has one, then you have to walk around with all these cards in your wallet. What I'm saying is, the reason for them is loyalty, and a lot of these things even call them loyalty cards. And so the reason that these places have them is because they think that if you give people a card that gives them a discount, or you make them think that they're getting a discount, that it will keep that person constantly coming into your store as opposed to other stores. Is that the only strategy we have? Is that it? That's all we can come up with now?
I go to the stores that generally have the best prices. So if you can get me the best deal, that's where I'm going to go. And maybe that sucks. I don't know. But
that's how it used to be. I mean, make it simpler for the consumer, not more complicated.
But just because I have a card that says that I'm going to get a coupon for 40% off at Borders, well, Borders, if it has crap prices, I'm not going to go to Borders. I'm going to go somewhere else, and I'm going to take my 40% coupon, buy the one thing, and then go somewhere else.
Yeah, and I'm not naming any names of certain companies when I say this, but and I only say that right now because you mentioned Borders, and this has nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
But what I want to say is, I'm positive that there are certain companies that put these cards out and then they hike their prices up, so that you think you're getting a discount when you're actually not. So if you have the card, it gets you back down to what it should cost.
Right.
If you don't have the card, you're paying more, and so it isn't. So the card isn't actually saving anyone any money, and it's not a reward card like it says. It's actually the opposite, because the people who don't have the card are being penalized for not having the card.
Yeah.
So it's a non-penalty card.
It's a get out of jail free card.
Now, I'm not saying that with every company, and I'm not saying every company's cards are necessarily bad. There are, and again, to be fair, I won't name any names on this either, but there are some companies that I think actually have some decent programs with some of these things.
Sure.
I'm just saying that it's gimmicky. Let's just go back to making it simpler and better for customers. And let's make your store policies and your prices and all that jazz the thing that keeps your customers coming back, and stop throwing around words like loyalty and stuff. I don't know. I don't like it when I go into a place and they tell me to be loyal to them. It bothers me.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just kind of bothers me.
See, I don't mind incentives. Somebody gives me something that says, "Hey, come on back." But
well, that's a different thing. Yeah.
But. Like, for example, I have a friend that he runs an online business, and he used to work out of his own store, and I walked into his store one day, but when I was just getting to know the guy, and I said, I'm interested in the Shadow, but I don't necessarily know much about him. I don't know if I'd like him. And he said, well, here's a cassette tape of Shadow radio shows.
Oh, I think you've mentioned this before.
Yeah, I think I have. He says, you take this, you listen to it, and it's yours. You can just have it. And granted, that's a small business, so he can do that. He's the proprietor, he can do that. So I take it, I listen to it, and I was immediately back in the following week to buy everything that he had that said Shadow on it, because I liked it that much. I mean, it's an incentive. He didn't necessarily have to give me a discount card to get the rest of the stuff. I was just interested to get the rest of it. Yeah,
and again, that wasn't gimmicky. That's just good business.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think honesty over loyalty, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was. That was maybe a heated rant.
Oh, heated rant.
But it's something I've been wanting to talk about for a while, because it does sort of bug me. I think not so much that places have discount cards, but just that nearly everybody seems to be doing it now. That's the big fad. I don't dig that. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast, and we'll come back with you with another interesting and fascinating topic next week. I'm Captain Logan.
And I am Vince.